The launch of Black Ops 6 felt like a great time for Zombies fans. There were 2 maps that ended up both being received pretty well, high quality cutscenes tying the story together, an obvious path forwards for future maps and the story, and loads of new players flocking to the mode. I remember seeing so many people who I knew as like Warzone players or multiplayer players coming over to Zombies to try it out. And now in Season 2 for Black Ops 6, which just launched on Tuesday, we were surprised with the 4th map for Zombies. I think most people, like me, expected map 4 to come maybe sometime in Season 3, Season 3 Reloaded maybe, especially since in the previous game, Black Ops Cold War, we only ended up with 4 maps in total across the entire year, unless you include Outbreak. But the new map that came on Tuesday, Tomb, has arrived, and it's been pretty divisive. Between the reused enemies, the perk and the wonder weapon being from previous games, and the boss being, an inanimate object, and the final cutscene being mostly unvoiced while the intro cutscene was just completely missing, it's easy to say that the new map feels rushed. So in this video we're going to take a look at what's really going on with Call of Duty Zombies. First of all, let's talk about the map itself. I don't hate Tomb, but it does feel like everything good you can say about it kinda needs to come with a caveat. So it does look quite nice. I was impressed with the spawn room and the Dark Ether environment at the end, but it's nowhere near the scale or detail that we had with Black Ops 3 or 4 maps, or even a distinctive style and aesthetic that we had in Mauer Toten in Black Ops Cold War. It feels like it's kind of gone back to that dreary, drab aesthetic where everything kind of looks the same, which we saw in the other Black Ops Cold War maps. Remember how cool the maps in Chaos looked, like 9 being in that Colosseum and having all of the different temples and then the huge underground ossuary, and then Voyage of Despair being able to explore the Titanic, or in Black Ops 3 having Shadows of Evil and having all of those different streets, all of those different environments, those different businesses you could go in and out of. It just seemed so cool and so interesting to look at, and you just don't really get that with Tomb. Also, as a positive, there's actually a boss fight in this rather than just a lockdown like what we saw in Liberty Falls. But in practice, it does kind of still function like a lockdown, and the difficulty comes not from the boss, but from the hyper-aggressive bullet sponge enemies that they spawn. And I don't think there's anybody that when they think about what they'd really like to see in a Zombies map, they're like, oh, I wish there was like the regular enemies, but with more health and they could one-shot you. Like, that's what I'd really like to see. That doesn't seem to be what people are hoping for or asking for, but that seems to be what they insist on giving them to us. Just bullet sponge enemies instead of interesting mechanics. There is a cool side Easter egg with a good reward. I think the Blood Ritual is one of the best side Easter eggs we've had, but it is still reusing the same enemy types, and it feels like it's almost prohibitively hard to complete it unless you use exploits. I don't think many kind of normal Zombies players are ever going to complete the Blood Ritual unless they're using something like the Mutant Injector on a higher round or Idolize or something like that. And that's kind of all I can say for the positives of the map, which seems like a real shame. Like I said, I don't hate the map. I kind of did at the end of the first night when I still hadn't managed to complete it and I was getting really frustrated. But even now I have finished it and now I've done all the side Easter eggs that we found so far, I still don't think it stands out as being like memorable or interesting. It's just another map. It doesn't feel like as substantial of a map as even Liberty Falls. So let's move on to the uncaveated negatives. What are the downsides of this map? Let's go back to the looks of it first of all. While the first and last rooms are interesting looking, the others, like I said before, are so bland. There's a cave, a tomb, an ossuary, and a shrine, and you could kind of interchange all of those titles with all of the rooms, and you wouldn't be that far off. Like, yes, the ossuary has some more bones, and like the tomb has proper walls while the cave has rockwork, but they're all just kind of dark enclosed spaces where you'd expect to find dead things. It doesn't feel like you're descending further into a dig site. It feels like you're just moving between different themed rooms that have been cobbled together a little bit, and all of the themed rooms are kind of similar. Then going on to the enemy lineup, it's pretty atrocious, and I think lots of people have spoken about this. The new enemy on the map is the Electric Mimic, which functions pretty much the same as the Mimic always did from Black Ops Cold War and MWZ, and its main thing is it's got this annoying tendency while you're running past it or trying to run away from it, that it will grab you and pull it towards it. And then we've got Doppelgasts that were in the last map, and then we've got Amalgams that were from Terminus that also have an annoying tendency to grab you and pull them towards them. It's like having two enemies that do the same thing seems super weird. And then we've got Vermin and Parasites from previous maps. It's not like super unusual for Zombies maps to reuse enemies. I know that's been a thing for a long while in Zombies. But it does feel a little bit lazy and kind of misses the opportunity to do something cool. Like the Amalgams made sense in Terminus. They were a result of human experimentation. They'd escaped and they were like roaming around the lab. That made sense. So why are they here in Tomb? Why were they in Citadel de Mort? It just doesn't make sense. Like, is someone going around bringing these Amalgams and like dropping them off? Is there some sort of Dark Ether portal between these different places that's connecting them? Like, we could have had some really cool new Dark Ether monster that was like breaking out of the dig site, like come out of Dark Ether through the portal in there, and it was starting to cause havoc. Or we could have had some skeletal monstrosity to fit with the idea of it being a tomb, but instead they just chose to go with what they already had available. And the same holds true for the perk. We've just got Depth Perception coming back from Black Ops Cold War. I don't think anyone ever cared about it in Black Ops Cold War. All it does is that you see zombies kind of through walls a bit, and in Zombies it's never a problem how to find the zombies because they're always just walking towards you, so that's never really an issue. Bizarrely, in this map they did set up the side Easter egg, the blood ritual, where there's loads of like blood mist appears and you can't see very well. Perfect opportunity to have this kind of, oh yeah, you can't see very well, but if you get the new perk, Depth Perception, that counters it and lets you see them, but it doesn't bloody work. Like, it literally doesn't help you to see the enemies in the blood ritual. That seems like such an obvious missed opportunity. I guess it does help a tiny bit in the boss fight at the end, where you're trying to look for these big enemies and you sort of see them coming around corners and stuff like that. Depth Perception helps a tiny bit there, but it feels like it could have been entwined with the map and done something really interesting. Or they could have just given us a new perk that changes the way we play other maps. You know, like lots of people have been saying they want something like Double Tap, because then, you know, the way you do damage would be very, very different and maybe a bit more interesting. And the Wonder Weapon, the Ice Staff, is another returning feature from Origins. I'm sure lots of people who are playing Tomb probably haven't played Origins because it's from quite a while ago, so it will feel new to a lot of people. But there's not really any reason for the Ice Staff to be at this dig site. It's not like the Beam Smasher in Terminus or the Jet Gun in Liberty Falls, where you're crafting them and they're obviously kind of human-designed weapons that have been created by scientists, or the swords in Citadel de Mort, which are like a part of the magic of that castle. They're kind of interwoven with the story and they make sense. But the ice staff is just a wonder weapon plucked from an old map, and that old map used to have 4 in it. Like, they didn't think the ice staff was enough for Origins. They had to have like 4 wonder weapons in it, and now we just get one of them, and it's given us like a bit of fan service, I guess. It is fun to use once you've got it upgraded. Like, it's a fun wonder weapon to use. I would say I enjoy it more than the Beam Smasher, and maybe even more than the swords. But wouldn't it have been maybe a bit more fun to have all 4 staff so everyone on your team can have a different one? Or just something new entirely? Maybe something linked to the Sentinel artifact in the Chaos story, since that's the whole point of the map. Like, why not have something where it's like, hey, the Sentinel artifact has brought this with it? In the outro cutscene, they mention that it had been seen in, like, was it ancient Rome or ancient Egypt? I don't know. I thought it was meant to be a reference to 9, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong with that. But it's like, then why not have that weird scorpion wonder weapon if you're insisting on bringing one back and say, like, hey, the Sentinel artifacts kind of brought this with it? That would be kind of interesting. But really, it would have just been better to get something new. And speaking of that Sentinel artifact, the boss fight is really weird. Like, you're fighting a suddenly aggressive artifact that can apparently fire lasers, spin around, summon enemies from statues, and then not really do anything else. Like, there's no threat. You're not like, yeah, I want to kill this Sentinel artifact. This is the thing that we've gone to get. But you're destroying it over and over again. Like, it doesn't make sense within the story. It doesn't make sense of, you know, why you're there. You're trying to pick up this thing, so you're going to blast it to pieces over and over again until eventually it stops firing lasers everywhere. And why is it even invincible most of the time anyway? Like, there's loads of times where it's just like, oh, by the way, it's invulnerable. Like, your shots aren't doing anything. They're not having any effect. But now they are, because it's summoning a creature. It seems really, really, like, odd and arbitrary. And the whole fight feels a bit like this. Like, the first phase of it, I'd say there's sort of 3 phases in the fight. The first phase, you're just waiting for it to go up and down a couple of times until it goes up, and then you can start shooting it. And while it's doing that, it summons a few regular zombies, and that whole first phase is just really mind-numbingly dull. There's not a lot going on. There's not a lot of threat, really. I get that, like, the first time you do it, it kind of teaches you, okay, if you get hit by the laser, it will stun you. Like, this is what happens. But then do you really have to do that until you've destroyed 4 of the artifacts? There's a bit of a DPS check involved, but it's not like, oh, if you can't pass that DPS check, you can go back and level up your weapons, because you can't. Like, you're just gonna die. If you fail that DPS check at the beginning, then it's just like, oh yeah, this fight's gonna go on forever for you, or until you die. And that kind of sucks. Like, that's not an interesting mechanic. And then when you get into the second phase, obviously that's the more interesting one, where suddenly everything goes crazy and you're frantically trying to dismantle these bullet sponge versions of enemies that you've already been fighting for the entire map, and then you destroy the artifacts some more for some reason. And then there's the final DPS check, where again it's like, hey, remember that you've done all of this, you've probably been playing the game for like an hour, now you've got through this difficult second phase. Now, if you don't realise that you're not watching a cutscene and you're actually meant to shoot the thing on the wall, we're going to wipe you and make you start the whole thing again. Again, that doesn't feel like a lot of fun. This isn't like, later on I'm going to talk about Destiny raids a little bit, but I'm going to sneak it in here as well. In Destiny raids, sometimes there are mechanics like this, where if you fail them, it can wipe you. Like, they'll do something at the end of the fight, where if you fail it, it wipes you. But the big difference is in Destiny raids, the boss encounter is its own thing with a checkpoint before it. So if it wipes you, you just go back and have to do that one fight again. You don't have to then start the entire thing from scratch. Mechanically, the tomb boss fight is just not a particularly interesting fight, and the difficulty seems kind of more based on your loadout than anything, with no indication before you go in of what you're going to need. If you go in with an assault rifle or an LMG, it is super difficult. If you go in with an SMG, it's basically impossible. I don't know, maybe someone's done it, but I haven't seen anyone complete it with an SMG yet. If you go in with like a sniper rifle or a shotgun, it's almost too easy. Like, you do so much damage to the artifact, you do so much damage to the elite zombies, like the amalgams and stuff that are running around, that it makes it so easy. Unless, you know, you've got one of the weapons that fires explosive ammo, because now that's not going to do any damage to the boss. And again, you won't find that out until you've worked through the entire Easter egg for like an hour, and then you get to the boss fight and find you literally can't damage the boss. Especially if you've got the ice staff as well, which will do very little damage. So you won't be able to complete the boss. And there's no indication of that. There's no way to know that earlier on. It's just, you get to the boss and then it's like, oh yeah, your gun doesn't do any damage to it. Sucks to be you, I guess. As I said earlier, my main point of comparison for zombies maps, and like kind of what I would hope for them, what I would expect from them, are the Destiny raids. They're both big community events where people go into an unknown encounter to work together, trying to like beat it and discover the mechanics. They both propel the story forward. They challenge your skills and mastery of the mechanics, and they often introduce new weapons or features that you need to then use in interesting ways to beat it. We even used to get them at about the same cadence, although this year we're getting zombies maps a bit quicker, and I feel like Destiny's kind of slowed down a bit to the point where you kind of get one revisited raid and then one new raid, with much bigger gaps between them. But there's so many things that Destiny do so well. First of all, Destiny actually celebrate the raids. They celebrate the like race for worlds first. They host streamers, they give out prizes, like a big belt type thing they give to the first team. They keep up with it and they sort of say to everyone, okay, this is the time when it's going to start, and everyone can follow along, which is really awesome. And just doing the raids, whether you're doing it on the sort of challenge weekend when they make it a little bit harder in that first little bit, or whether you're doing it later on, it's nearly always an incredible experience. The raid maps look incredible, they're dramatic, they have cohesive themes. that are all super different to each other. You can always tell, like, straight away from looking at a screenshot of a Destiny raid which raid it's from, because the environments and the enemies and everything just look quite different. They have super impressive vistas where you can kind of normally see something incredible and important to the Destiny lore or something we've never seen before in the background. They have interesting arenas with lots of like moving parts and kind of interesting layouts and stuff. Each step of the raid, each encounter is usually its own puzzle. Even the bits between the encounters are usually some kind of puzzle. Often with new things that haven't been seen before that raid, or new types of enemies, or interesting kind of twists on old encounters. They reward teamwork, although often they are possible solo if you're incredibly good at them. They require communication and using every ability at your disposal. They usually teach you individual mechanics in each encounter, and then they're all kind of brought together for the final boss, which is huge levels above in terms of like scale and difficulty. Then when you do manage to get past them, whether that's an encounter or the final boss, the rewards are themed to that raid. You get like armor pieces or weapons that are themed to the raid that you've just completed, and they kind of feel like an appropriate trophy for the challenges you've just overcome. In Zombies, with the new map, Tomb for example, it's a tiny little hole in the ground that looks a bit like lots of other things that you've seen before. It's filled with enemies that you've fought before. Nearly every step of the Easter egg is either a lockdown or a matching puzzle, which, you know, we already had a matching puzzle in Citadel de Mort where you had to look for the symbols on the jugs and then put them on that wall. Now you're looking for symbols on flying rocks and putting them into a wall again. The new feature is the Wonder Weapon, and it's just from an old map. It's something that we've seen before. You can actually make it through pretty much every encounter, not having to master all of the different things in your toolkit, not having to work together, but just by using the right shotgun and blasting everything. And then the final boss is a spinning piece of furniture in a room that's full of enemies that you've seen before. And then what do you get as a reward if you complete everything? A slightly different skin for the ice staff, which doesn't have anything to do with the map or the story. Like, the skin you get isn't like, hey, yeah, this is like a fitting trophy for you. It's just like, oh yeah, now you can have a staff where the end of it is green instead. And it can only be used on the map that you just beat anyway. And like, for me personally, after I beat the map, I didn't really feel like going back into it again. And the story, like, spoilers for the story if you haven't beaten Tomb yet, maybe just skip ahead 30 seconds. But essentially the story before we got to Tomb was that we needed the Sentinel artifact to get Maxis back from the Dark Ether. It's supposedly buried in a dig site and we need to race Richtofen to get it. And then within the map, we get it. And that's the end. That's the end of the story. That's the end of the Tomb story, is we needed to go and get it, and then we got it. There's no intro cutscene. The outro is just characters wordlessly running to a helicopter, and then we have this little animation with SAM telling us we now need to go back to Liberty Falls to use the artifact, just to let us know that the next map is set in the mansion, which was in the intro to Liberty Falls. And although it's not super important, it's worth noting as well that Activision, Call of Duty, Treyarch didn't do anything to kind of really celebrate the race for Worlds First. They didn't like host a stream where the developers are watching and commentating on what's going on. They didn't celebrate the first team to complete it or anything like that. They didn't really care about the integrity of it, like people were already loading the map before you were meant to be able to. It just seemed a bit like, yeah, they just throw these maps out and then they forget about them. They don't really talk about them anymore after they're out there. It's such a massive difference from how Destiny work their raids. It's crazy because like both of these companies were under Activision at one point. And it's just so weird that Bungie seem to have such a better grasp on how to kind of make this an exciting time for the community compared to what Activision do at the moment with Call of Duty. So how did we get here? How did we go from the most exciting new Zombies experience that people were hyped for with Black Ops 6 to this map that feels so rushed and half-hearted, like 3 months after the launch? Well, first of all, it is important to note that it's a miracle that we ever get any Zombies content at all. I know it's super easy for anyone in the community to kind of overestimate how popular the mode is, like people did with DMZ. But I feel fairly confident that Zombies is the least popular mode in Black Ops 6. I'm willing to bet that more people have played multiplayer or Warzone or even the campaign than they have played Zombies. As purely anecdotal evidence, out of my real life friends who play Call of Duty, I don't think any of them have tried Zombies in Black Ops 6. Out of the people that watch my streams and are on my Discord, bearing in mind I do stream Zombies content quite a lot, very few of them actually give it a go. Like DMZ, it's a fun thing to watch other people do, so streams and videos tend to do fairly well. But the actual player base seems very small compared to the other modes. People always point at like how many people are watching Noah J streams or Mr. Waffle Waffle streams or Codename Pizza or Mr. Dalek when there's a new map or something like that. People are like, oh look, they've got huge audiences, surely Zombies is super popular. But I think a lot of those people, you know, that's when a new map comes out, a lot of those people are just watching those streamers because it's a fun thing to do, rather than playing the maps themselves. It's something that I used to do when new maps used to come out back in the days of like Black Ops 3. I wouldn't hop into it and play it. I would watch Noah J playing it. I would just watch him streaming it. That was a lot more fun than me trying to find a group of 3 other people to play it with and then struggling through it ourselves. It was just more fun to watch someone play it instead. And on top of that, Treyarch recently posted that out of the people that have played Zombies, which, you know, I'm already assuming is quite a small proportion of Call of Duty players, less than 5% of those players have completed any of the Easter eggs in Black Ops 6 outside of directed mode. 5%! So that's a tiny, tiny number out of what is probably already a tiny proportion of the Call of Duty player base. Even with the addition of directed mode, which literally tells you what to do, it's made it as easy and accessible as possible, which I think Treyarch were hoping would sort of take away the difficulty barrier for Easter eggs, make it so anybody who wanted to do a Zombies Easter egg could. That number's only gone up to 10%. So only 10% of players who play Zombies seem to even be interested at all in doing the Easter eggs. So it's crazy that we get them. It's crazy that they develop these new maps with Easter eggs in them. Well, I say Easter eggs. I keep using the word Easter eggs. It's what the community uses. But as Call of Duty call it, the main quest. That less than 10% of players will do the main quest in a Zombies map, even when you tell them exactly how to do it. That just implies that the other 90% aren't interested. They're not bothered. They're people who probably just loaded up Zombies once and were like, yeah, this isn't for me. I'm going to stop playing now. They still count on the sort of figures that Activision can trot out so they can say, oh, Call of Duty is the most popular third mode, you know, when put up against Survival or Extinction or the raids. But they're not really engaging with the mode. So when Treyarch are developing a Zombies Easter egg, and the rewards and the outro cutscenes that go with it, it's going to be experienced by less than 10% of the players who are playing the least popular mode in the game. Compare that to making a new experience in Warzone or a limited time mode in multiplayer, and it suddenly looks like not a great return on the time, effort and resources that go into it. I'm sure making a Zombies map, even something like Tomb, is horrendously expensive. I'm sure there's lots of people working on it, there's lots of artists involved, lots of developers involved, there's a huge amount of work that needs to go into doing something like that, and so few people are experiencing it or being interested at all in it. So why do Treyarch do it? I assume in some way it's a little bit of a passion project for some people at this point. I think Treyarch just see it as kind of part of what their take on Call of Duty is compared to the other companies. You know, their Call of Duty games, they have zombies in them. That's a part of their sort of DNA. So they keep on doing it because that's how they see themselves. That's their identity. Surely if Zombies hasn't like taken off in the mainstream after 6 games, it probably isn't going to. Like, they've tried lots of different things. They've tried Outbreak, they've tried MWZ, they've tried the weird sort of roguelike type thing they went for with Vanguard. It doesn't seem to be attracting a new audience. So at this point, I think they've probably just decided, yeah, let's just keep making it for the community that like it. So in some ways, we should be thankful for them. But of course, it is still a business. So if we start looking at it a bit more cynically, they also need to find a way to get the most profit back possible, so their little passion project of doing Zombies as a mode isn't too expensive. So that probably means cutting costs, so less of the cutscenes, which are horrendously expensive from everything I've heard about them, less voice actors, less new models and features and animations, so, you know, the perks and the weapons and the monsters and stuff like that. We've seen all of that being massively cut back in Tomb. I guess they're probably testing the water to see what they can cut while keeping the community happy. And this isn't the first time this has happened. Like in previous Zombies games, they've gone from these full amazing cinematics to using like 2D animations, just cutting loads of stuff out, starting to repeat things, starting to reuse assets, bring back old maps and stuff like that. If we got even more cynical, they also need to maximize how much money they can make from it. So they want Zombies players to buy bundles, of course, so they can't give good skins away for free. Otherwise, why would you buy a different one? So the reward for this map, Tomb, that stupid Ice Staff skin, is just something that nobody would ever buy. No, that's never going to stop someone from buying another bundle. Because if they released, say, a really cool character skin, which they have done a little bit before, the Mayor skin that we got for Liberty Falls, was it? Or was it Terminus? I don't know, one of the first ones, was actually really cool. I thought that looked really good, and it's like, oh, I'd rather use that rather than buying a Mayor skin off the store. So they probably don't want that to happen again. They probably instead want to kind of give us rewards that won't replace our want to buy bundles for different characters and stuff like that. And then the other big way that they make money from Zombies players is by selling gobblegums. And I did a video previously about how crappy I think this is. Because a good way to make people want to buy gobblegums is to release tougher content. And content that's made a lot easier by using gobblegums. So in Tomb, you can only get one staff across your entire team. Even if there's 4 of you, there's only one staff on this map. Unless you're really lucky with the mystery box, or you can use like an ultra rare Wonder Bar Gobblegum, and then you can, well, still only have a 50% chance of getting it from the mystery box. So you might end up using more than one if you want to try and get it. So it's like, hey, if you want to play with the big new weapon on this map, one person on your team gets to, and if anyone else wants to, you need to use Gobblegums, really, to get it. Realistically, you need to use Gobblegums to get it. If you go into the boss fight on a high level, it's really, really tough. But you could go into it much earlier. If, say, you used Perkaholic and just got all of the perks for free so you didn't have to save up loads of essence. Gobblegums like Idolize and Raindrops make both the blood ritual and the boss fight so much easier. Like, in my guide for how to do the boss fight, I was like, yeah, use Idolize if you can. It just makes the whole thing so much simpler. After that first night where I was really struggling against this map, like, we'd had 2 attempts on the boss within like 7 hours of gameplay, which absolutely sucked because we'd had crashes and things like that. And then we'd failed at the boss attempt both times. And then the next morning, I was just out of good gobblegums. I'd run out of Perkaholics, I'd run out of Wonder Bars. I think I had like 1 Raindrops left. And I was almost tempted to buy some more just so I could get this Easter egg done. And I'm sure that's exactly what they would like to hear. I'm not saying they definitely designed the map to try and encourage more people to buy gobblegums. But if they're making money by selling things that make the game easier, it definitely does make sense for them to make the game harder. And Tomb is a difficult map, at least not without the gobblegums. It's not difficult in like an interesting way, with fun mechanics that once you've mastered them, then it's much easier. Or it's not super atmospheric and, you know, the difficulty is part of the atmosphere. It just uses these cheap tricks, like enemies that can one-shot you, like how Mr. Waffles got killed on the first night when he had 2 plates and a full health bar and just got one shot by an enemy after, you know, using gobblegums or playing through the map for like an hour and a half. That absolutely sucks. And sometimes there's just so much going on once on the screen, it's just kind of hard to read what's dangerous and what isn't. There's a lot of visual clutter that makes it easier to die, and then obviously if you die, all those gobblegums you've used are wasted. You need to use some more if you want to get back to where you just were. Also, why did we get Tomb so quickly if they didn't have time to do something more substantial? People have said Tomb was rushed, and if it was rushed, like why? Why not just wait? No one expected to get Tomb at the beginning of Season 2. Maybe it's so we had a Zombies map at the beginning of a season, which is the time people are most likely to buy a new Battle Pass. You know, think of all the Zombies fans who probably wouldn't have bothered playing Call of Duty in Season 2 at all if there wasn't a new Zombies map, but because it was launch day, they were waiting for a new map, they had a chance to like buy the new Battle Pass. I'm sure lots of people did buy the Battle Pass who wouldn't have otherwise because there was a Zombies map at launch. Now on top of all of this, getting to the very highest level of cynicism, when the game crashes, like it did for me and Dalek when we were playing on our first attempt on the Easter egg, you lose all of your Perkaholics that you've used, Wonder Bars you've used, anything like that. And when you crash now, like in Season 2, they've added a bunch of systems to try and get you back into the game where you can have your weapons, or you can get a bunch of essence when you get back into the game, or even have your perks. But they don't refund your gobblegums. Both me and Dalek, like I said, crashed out after we'd used Perkaholic, Wonder Bar and Hidden Power, and we actually couldn't get back in because it said like we were on a different version or something. There'd been an update from when we crashed from before when we started playing. And that meant that we just had to use more. Like, that seems like if they want to sell something disposable, if they can make you dispose of that thing more often and need more of them, why wouldn't they? Why would they do something where it's like, oh, you crashed out of that game, we're going to refund you those gobblegums? They don't want to do that. You know, some people might exploit it. Some people might crash their game on purpose in order to get gobblegums back. We can't have that happening. So instead, they just accept that, oh yeah, in this game that, despite being on an engine that's been used for a few years at this point, still constantly crashes and is very, very unstable. Yeah, we're going to let you use one-time things that you can pay for that you lose if it crashes. That maybe is a little bit cynical, but it does seem like that was part of what almost made me want to buy more gobblegums, was this feeling that, oh, I've lost a bunch in those crashes and things like that. Maybe if I just buy a few more, then I'll be able to do it. For the record, I've never bought gobblegums. We get given COD points for free sometimes by Activision, and I've never even spent any of those on gobblegums because I just really don't want to support that whole system. But the temptation was definitely there. All in all, I think Tomb isn't the most interesting map, but it is an interesting symptom of a larger problem of zombies. I don't think Activision know what to do with it. It's an expensive mode to make that has a small but very quick to anger community, and to make continuing with it worthwhile, they need to find a way to make as much money out of that community as fast as they possibly can, because their attempts to grow the community, like Outbreak and MWZ and the directed mode, just haven't worked out as much as they'd like. If you as a business can't get more customers, then to grow you need to get more money out of the customers that you already have, and that's not great for the customers. It does strike me as kind of an aside from all of this that Call of Duty doesn't really have any visionary developers that publicly talk about what they want the game to be and, you know, their passion for the game. You get people like Kevin Drew who come out and say, oh yeah, we're going to do the right thing for the fans this time, we're going to give people what they want, and Ted Timmins does kind of a similar thing at Raven for Warzone. I don't think there's really people like that exactly for Infinity Ward or Sledgehammer, at least not that I know of. It feels like it's a game that's being made by a big corporation in order to extract as much money from people as possible. You know, you look at other companies, you look at other games where they've got a team behind them that clearly care passionately about what they're doing, and they've got like a strong creative vision for what they're trying to do. I think Call of Duty's had that in the past, and it's just kind of lost it a little bit. It's just become a kind of system that makes so much money they can't possibly mess with the money making side of it. So now any sort of creative risks, any attempt to do something that would make for a really cool piece of art or a really cool experience but wouldn't make them more cash, just isn't viable anymore. It's not something they can do. It wouldn't appease the stakeholders, the shares, whatever. I don't know, I don't understand investment, but you know what I mean. It feels like the kind of heart has gone out of Call of Duty probably quite a long time ago, but then zombies as well with this new map. Now it could just be a blip, I could be wrong, like this could just be a little blip, maybe the next map will be great, this was a bit of filler just to make sure we had a map in Season 2. Maybe the next map isn't going to be ready for a little while, so they thought they'd move this one forwards. I've got absolutely no idea. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. I am getting super fed up of making these negative videos about Call of Duty, saying like, oh, Warzone's not great at the moment, is it? And like, oh, Zombies isn't fantastic anymore, like what's happened there? And you know, I don't really do stuff about the campaign or multiplayer that much because I don't care about them. But it does feel a bit like there's a part of me that makes these videos because I do still care about Call of Duty. I want Call of Duty to be good. Call of Duty is something that I'm interested in. The idea of having a really exciting Call of Duty would be absolutely awesome. And it's just not there. The game just isn't in a position not only to like be super exciting right now, but it feels like it's not really in a position to get more exciting. I feel like all of these problems I've been talking about, they're not going to go away, they're not going to be solved, they wouldn't be changed by having new management or different developers or a different setting for the game or better technology or anything like that. It's just, this is something that makes a huge amount of money, and they are going to insist on doing everything they possibly can to keep it making as much money as possible, instead of thinking about how they can kind of push the medium forwards, how they can do something that matters or how they can do something that's exciting. And that's really sad. So in the meantime, I'm just going to play other things. I can't imagine I'm going to play any more of Tomb. I'll probably play the next Zombies map when it comes out. I'm sure when they do a big new release for Warzone, I'll probably hop back on Warzone. But there's nothing really in Call of Duty for me right now.